it was obviously, as you mentioned, it's clear what it's about. It's not just about telling their story. It felt like an attack. A lot about sort of, it felt vengeful. But none of the content that they've put out so far, and we're looking at like nearly 3 hours worth of content, has actually justified what their angle is. What the reason for it.
It's a definite attack, and I think that's a power play to make them look like victims, not only just of, well, the entire world, but of things, of the past and things. It's really strange. I mean, one of the first things she said was, "Oh, we got engaged and we had to do a rehearsed interview." It's like, well, what are you doing now? This interview isn't off the cuff. Your firm, Archwell Productions, is producing this. You're the one who would have signed off on the questions and been able to get yourself ready for it. What are you?
We should call it an orchestrated. We should call that original interview an orchestrated reality show, which is basically exactly what you're doing right now by this. Totally orchestrated. And it's frustrating because you obviously see it at the point, like, one of the things. So this is a little bit more muted than the previous one in terms of, like, I don't know, you sort of, raring to go with the other two. This one, it's like, wow, it's just actually quite offensive. The hugging thing was pretty bad, but this one it screams as like, the whole thing was just constant attack, barrage, we're awful, we're terrible, and particularly, like, on the beginning of this one, they said, like, the most popular member of the royal family, arguably, which is true, it was arguable at this point, he was, which is why she was so well treated.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that most of the guests they have on, so, who's the guy with the, like, blondish hair, what's his name?
So James Holt, who happens to be, conveniently, the director of Archwell. I'm sure he's going to be a neutral voice.
And then the other two prominent speakers, if you help me out with the names.
Well, it was Afua Hirsch. She's like I say, she came up previously in the other two. I don't think she came up so much in the next one, but yeah, she, a communist. You can be communist, that's not a problem. But
for people who don't know, and that's going to be most people unless you're British, she is very left. She works for a very left newspaper. She wants to abolish the royal family. She's not shy in saying that. And the gentleman, what's his name?
I can't quite remember what his name was. There was a speaker on at the end who's very in a similar vein to Afua Hirsch, but yeah, he seemed to have quite a dominant role. But to be honest, I was slightly mystified enough for this one to sort of listen to the nonsense. What did he say about the schools thing? Where he's like, you mentioned about that, about what we learned at school or something.
So him and like James Holt said that they never got taught slavery at school. Well, I don't know the school that they went to, but I went to a very working class primary school, and same with high school. There was no privilege there whatsoever, and I got told about slavery, and not just from a British power side, which is what that James Holt thought it would have been. We got taught about all aspects. We got taught about the slaves being taken over. We had to watch that. The drama teacher made us sit through that Amistad film, which is, got a powerful message, but is a terrible film. They probably watch something more relevant now, like, I don't know, Django Unchained or 12 Years a Slave. But we absolutely
Django Unchained.
Yeah, we absolutely got taught about slavery. Absolutely did. And again, I don't know, but we had a big discussion on it. It was like we got taught about it, and then in the end we had a big discussion on what it means and everything. And like that James Holt guy says that, he was only taught of colonial Britain through celebration of it. Again, No, I don't remember ever having a lesson on the celebration of colonial Britain. We definitely had lessons on kind of like wars that we'd won, like World War II and against Napoleon. But we also had history lessons in primary school and high school from when we were invaded by the Romans, by the Vikings, by the French, by the Germans. Do you know, there's a reason why there's so much German, so much French, and so much Latin in the English language. And even to a certain extent, Scandinavian, we've got some origin words there. And that's because we've been invaded by them. So I don't know what schools that them two went to, but I can't imagine it was a worse school than one I went to. But we still definitely got taught it.
Yeah, it's just a strange thing, and I don't understand. Right, we're talking about this, and that's perfectly fine. Of course, like the monarchy is a historic institution. Of course, that does sort of demand some element of conversation. Of course, it invites that. I don't understand what on earth this has to do with Meghan Markle, though. Don't get it at all. What on earth does this have to do with her? Nothing whatsoever. At
No.
all. Nothing.
I get that, like, obviously she's the first mixed race person to marry someone prominent in the royal family. But at the same time, like, that's got nothing to do with Elizabeth I funding slavery.
Elizabeth the First. Well, this is the thing, like I say, slavery, we didn't just stop doing it, which I'm absolutely ecstatic that we did. It was a global, we stopped it worldwide and still paid for that up until very, very recently. And I'm absolutely glad that we had that. But if you want to talk about the negatives, then that's fine. I'm absolutely understanding towards that because there are plenty of them. But if you want to compare history in a parallel situation, I mean, there was a lot worse, and I don't even know if there was much better either. And if there was better, then maybe they just weren't able to sort of had the ability to do such a thing, you know.
But it
But
wasn't
either
just
way,
that though. Like they were talking about Queen Elizabeth II, who is just passed away. But they were like, oh, her father changed it over to be a Commonwealth, which was still in Britain's favour. So again, that's a leftist narrative because people now, and it's very important to say, who are in the Commonwealth are there by choice. They can leave at any point, like Barbados, they've recently left. Australia keeps threatening to have a referendum on it every now and again. Hong Kong didn't want to leave us because they didn't want to be ruled by China. And that's had, there's been uproar there, there's been arrests and all manner of terrible stuff. But every member of the Commonwealth, as of now, and as of 1949, is in the Commonwealth by their own choice. For some countries, it's seen as a good thing because if you're in the Commonwealth, you essentially get, you get naval protection, you get army protection by the British, and we don't take anything from them. I mean, we may have done when it first started, however many hundreds of years ago that was, but certainly not now. They don't pay any tax to us. We don't get goods for free, or it's not that kind of relationship. It's more symbolic.
it was built on trade. Well, it's built on trade in any way. It was built on trade. It wasn't built on conquest as such. It was built on trade. Now, yeah, there was probably winners and losers in that, but as you just mentioned, it's an opt-in, opt-out situation now. There's no treaty as such, and if you want to leave, that is absolutely easily achieved. And you do find, and it's happened with nations where that does occur, and then what does take over, it tends to happen that happens to sort of be worse for said countries, which is exactly what you just mentioned. I know Hong Kong isn't a country, a principality, I suppose, is the closest thing you could say. And I was fortunate enough to go there just before we actually properly, like, the actual, like, separation truly occurred, and China was, took over, and it was a great place. I really enjoyed it. I can say, like, watching the tanks from China on the border, ready to sort of come in. That's something of concern. But Hong Kong is like one of the epicenters of the financial situation in that particular region, because it's about mutual cooperation. So I don't understand this, like Afro Hirsch, as you said. I don't think this left wing is necessarily a terrible thing, because I would probably say a lot of my leanings are towards the left. I'm sort of, it depends on the issue, but leftist, when it starts to become like, okay, well, the capitalism, let's do that. And they mention capitalism in this. Oh, it's a capitalist thing. But like these concepts, like, again, what does this have to do with Meghan Markle? Of course, she's a capitalist. She's basically made money out of this whole situation. So she wants money, and she wants fame, and she wants adoration. That's about as capitalist as it can get. It's personal wealth. Because if she was like more sort of willing to kind of take the situation and help other people before herself, then she could have absolutely fulfilled that role in the situation that she was in the royal family. But it isn't. It was, oh, well, there's some people making, why not just hear our story from us? Like, because then she can make £100 million worth of, I don't know,
Well, that's
reality.
just the thing, isn't it? Well, that's just exactly the thing. So, it is their story from them. So you're only getting one side here. You're getting one side of what the Commonwealth is, without the side of it's an opt-in or out situation. Nobody's being forced to be in there. And it's funny, what Harry said when talking about Meghan's dad and the fact that he sold, allegedly, because I don't know if it's been confirmed, that he sold the photos for money. And Harry said, it's amazing what people will do when money's involved. And it's like, well, yeah, Netflix documentaries where you get paid $100 million. Like, you're doing great.
Yeah. The self-awareness is completely absent. I will say that. It's completely absent. I don't see any sort of, a lot of the accusations that were thrown down. There's people getting money and accolades and attention and the voice heard. There's a chap I mentioned before. He only had like a little segment, and he had like two things to say. His name's Kahindi Andrews, right? And he's a lecturer at Birmingham, at one of the universities in Birmingham. And it's a very particular field of study related around culture. I think it's African specific, African study specifically. But, he was on a BBC show, and it was debating the St. George flag and whether it's inherently racist. Like it's a racist display, right? Including around like the World Cup time when you're supposed to be sort of supporting of your particular country. And he was arguing that it just is by nature, the very design of it. So you've got in these people who've got like very slanted, focused views that are against it. So does that mean that Meghan feels that way about this as well? Does she back up his argument about that? Does she believe that the St. George is racist inherently? Does she believe in the abolition of the monarchy?
I don't know about any of that, but what it is, it's all set up to make her look like a victim. So, it's making out that she's a perpetual victim of 500 years of a racist Britain, which, by the way, if you live here, obviously you get racists, of course you do. You get all manner of awful people, you get homophobes, etc., etc. But again, it's nothing to do with Meghan Markle, but the narrative is to make her look like a victim of the UK press, a victim of her own family scandal, and a victim of race. And I think it's trying to claw back the public perception and make everybody feel sorry for her. But I'm sorry, if you're getting paid $100 million, I don't.
Sympathy runs out. Well, again, it's strange how this has sort of turned into the political stuff. This particular episode was very strong on it, and it's like the notion, which Prince Harry himself used, was unconscious bias. Now, that is not a cut and dry done deal. That is a debated opinion on psychology and about if that is even a thing. It's like
Was he
unconscious.
was he wearing his
Yeah.
Nazi uniform when he said that
Oh
statement?
God. No, but at least they acknowledged it. I'll give them some credit where it's due. At least they tackled that. That's something that I did say. Okay, well, yeah, they went there, which is something to do, but it went there in order to. It served a purpose, like, and I learnt my lesson from that. And I guess to some extent, that's was it. But I mean, it's a difficult one because we've the way in which our country handles our issues, right? This is the way we do it through humour. And we always have done for as long as I remember and long before me. We are a humour-focused, humour-centric culture. We think things are funny. We have to make light of the awful things, make jokes about them, right? Now, that I would imagine, now personally, I don't know a single person who has or would or ever will wear that. No, I do not think so. That I've not encountered anyone. I'm sure you haven't either. Is that correct? You haven't either encountered anyone
No,
who's
never.
worn. No, never. Right. So it's completely like out of the range. But let's just sort of be slightly kind of thoughtful about this. Like, it was probably a terrible, terrible joke from a young person who thinks like the outrageous is funny, which it can be. It can be quite humorous. As I said, we handle those sorts of things with humour. We've got jokes about Nazism. There's a whole musical, right, about that. It's not just the UK, really. I think the US does it as well. You've got the producers. That's something, right? It's the best way sometimes to handle things is through humour. Don't think that was the intention with Harry and him wearing that. I think it was just to be like outlandish. But at least it was acknowledged. I think that's something to note. The thing is, Meghan is a humour vacuum. There's no humour at all. I think there was one time he did crack a joke, and he's trying to do that whole lad joke thing. And it is a British thing because I know that I default to that a lot. I do. I'll try to sort of make a silly little off the cuff joke comment, but every time there was one point he said it when she did acknowledge it. He said, "Oh, that's clever. Yeah, he's funny." It's like she said something like that, and it was like, this is so weird. I mean, does she just make him feel miserable all the time, and that's just the focus of that? Because it's important, particularly for British males. I think generally, like, if we're going to have a joke and a silly kind of banter, we call it banter, right? That's a really important part of our culture. Really important.
Yeah, of course it is. But again, it doesn't fit the rhetoric. It doesn't fit what she wants. If he is not continuously thinking that he needs to evolve, how is she going to keep the control over him? And like something that annoyed me as well that the delectable Miss Hirsch said was she thought Harry was just another racist royal. However,
Wow.
she's been delighted to find out that he realises that somebody like him needs education to be anti-racist. Yeah, okay, cool. So that's sort of putting everyone in the same jar, isn't it? But whatever. And then
Well, you want to talk about unconscious bias. What kind of bias is that? That's like conscious bias or like overt bias or direct bias.
100% it is. But that served a purpose as well, didn't it? The royals are racist, but Harry isn't because Harry's educated himself. Princess Michael of Kent apologised because she didn't know the brooch was racist. She also apologised, but she didn't get the same respect from her. It's only Harry, because, he's dating somebody, he's married to somebody that's mixed race, that needs to have that grace from her to be able to be a normal person. It's very, very weird.
But it's funny you'd mentioned as well, like, so she apologised publicly, which is great. But she's not here to defend herself against their accusations or against that. There was no even an acknowledgement that she apologised for that. There was no acknowledgement. There was no kind of like, maybe it was this. It was just all designed to paint a picture, propped up by what's the word? How would you describe them? Like agitators, and grifters. It's just grifting, and it weaves narratives. And Harry was
absolutely, it was nice. Absolutely everything they said and everything they did is not refuted. At the end of the day, it's been produced by them, so they've had full control over it. And it's like when they said, oh, Meghan was really brave talking about the Me Too movement. If you're royal, you're not allowed to have a controversial charity. But all charity is important, whether it's controversial or not. But how short-term are the memories? Diana did a lot for AIDS. Was that not controversial?
I mean, it only seems to be controversial when it suits, doesn't it? It's like it was completely controversial what Diana did, and it's like when you're not even remembering something that you mentioned like an hour ago in your documentary that you would have watched religiously, because again, Saint Meghan, there was no fault on her whatsoever. She's just the loveliest person. The only time she did start to speak about herself, it was to make herself look like, oh, they said like I looked like the happy poo emoji, which I just thought was quite funny, because it is true, because that hat was just I mean, then again, she says this, right? I mean, did you see the horrible articles about Eugenie, Princess Eugenie and Beatrice, right? And they got that horrible ugly sisters thing that was going on against them. They're actual royals. They were royals. They were born into that situation. And they were called the ugly sisters, which is just really horrible. That wasn't really acknowledged. She's like, oh, I just like a poop emoji. And she's like, you've got literally the lightest, most generous, harsh British attention of the press, yeah. The harsh, the sort of lightest, the very gentle version of even just like a little joke at your expense, right? Or a little thing, which again, I think it's pretty low taste. I don't think it's great, and I think it happens as well in the US media, and I think it happens in the world media, actually. I don't even think we have to make it like Anglo-centric. Across the world, so the Spanish media can be very brutal. If you read some of their headlines, it's everywhere, right? They just want to make it about us now, for whatever reason. But they received all of that, and they are bought into that. They can't just run away from that scrutiny. And of course, that must get them down. It's probably why the titles that they're being sort of wound down to less and less and less and less and less and less. That might be a reason as to why. She said, "Oh, I'm sorry."
No,
yeah, no, I was just going to say. So she's had that little one incident where, and she's really going through this. Like she's digging to find that. It's like, oh, I look like a poop emoji. It's like personal. Like, so she's using other people's footage of them actually being papped. Her mum seems to have been papped more than she does, and she's claiming her dad staged his own pap situation. She said there's 9 or 10. There's a car behind them, I think was in the last video. Oh, there's a car behind us with feeding into housing securities. And then everyone's saying, oh, there was people trying to break in the house, there's people trying to come here, or everything's saying or using other examples, but not once did I see any of that happen to her. And that was the only thing that you could say, okay, maybe there's a headline that was pretty, oh yeah, out of Compton one. Yeah, it was a pretty bad thing. Hope the person got fired for that. Maybe, I don't know, it was just a stupid thing to say. Don't understand the concept. Don't get anybody who would think that way either, especially based on her. So it's weird. It was weird for me. Like she's used that one tiny thing. That's all she's got. And every episode she used Kate's footage in there. Yet all she said is "Waity Katie." Anyway, sorry, carry on.
No, I was just going to say, I think they want their titles stripped. I can't see how they're going to keep hold of them now.
Yeah.
They clearly don't care about Britain, a place where Harry was born, and a place of heritage for the children on the father's side. They clearly don't care about it. This is to give them a boost in America, and they don't care about Britain anymore. I think they want to be stripped because it fits their rhetoric. Again, so they can turn around and say that they didn't walk away, however they were shunned. And the reason that they were shunned is to do with race or whatever else she wants to throw at it. Whereas the reason that they'll be shunned is because of all these lies. And I would respect them so much more if they did just walk away and not say anything. But if they felt the need to say something, I would respect them so much more if they told the truth.
Yeah. And it really is the point. Like, in order to be sort of an honest person, you have to accept your own faults and your own limitations. You have to accept that sometimes you do things that are not right and are incorrect, and that you are fallible, particularly around the family. I mean, the fact that she used her niece in such a manner, who looked absolutely heartbroken. She looked like she was on the verge of tears, and that was very touching, I noticed. Very touching, especially because the excuse as to why she couldn't come to the wedding was very thin. And yet again, Meghan didn't accept any responsibility for that. She didn't. She said, oh, that's because it wouldn't have been good for the optics. Now, I tell you something, right? If I was to marry somebody, or somebody was to marry somebody, etc., and there was any idea, I don't care if it's the Prince of Mars, right, or the Queen of Sheba, I don't know, whatever. I would want to know, like, if my family aren't allowed to come, then I'm not coming. And if you're not able to work that out, then you work that out. And Meghan's eyes were on the prize over her family. Now, you could make arguments with her dad about the situation around that. Again, debatable. He likely did have a heart attack, and she did cut him out because she didn't like the flow of the conversation, and she was preferring the other way. And her sister, again, let's just accept her version of events. Take everything now as if Meghan was telling the complete truth about this particular thing. There is no excuse to not invite your niece to that wedding, especially if they're supposed to be as close as they were or are. She comes to your documentary, but she's not invited to your wedding. Even if you say, oh, can you just take a back seat? No one would have noticed who that girl was. Nobody.
No,
It was all optics. We wouldn't have done. I don't even remember her being a story at the time. I remember her dad being a story, but I don't remember her, her niece being a story. Who came out to slander her sister or her own mother. It was so exploitative. So exploitative.
If Camilla Parker Bowles can go to the wedding of Charles and Diana, Meghan Markle's cousin can go to her wedding.
Well, it was a niece. I think it's even worse though. It's a niece, wasn't it? That's what makes it even worse. The fact that it's her own niece, and that's the treatment. Yeah, no, well, she called her a sister. I think it's very confusing because they're probably about the same age. Because I think her half sister was older, but yeah, exactly that. If Camilla can turn up to that wedding and experience that such a situation, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever, doesn't? And she looked really in bits.
It's more lies and it's all more rhetoric. Like, the things that they're saying, they've got no proof for. It's just like, oh, I've said it, so you have to believe me. But the problem with Meghan and Harry is that the interviews they've done before, the press releases they've done before, they've tripped up and they've been hypocritical, and we can find the lies. So why are we going to believe you now off just what you've said and no evidence? We're not.
Well, there's this whole online movement. They call them the Sussex Squad on Twitter. That's a reference for them. And none of them seem to care about anything previously or afterwards, etc. A lot of them attack Kate. I mean, it's very bizarre, almost like a cult. You can have your preferences on things. You can be a fan group or whatever. But they was like, oh, so we're going to get the receipts. 3 hours in, right? 3 hours of this we've watched. What receipts have been shown? There's been claims. There's been all tell and no show. There's been lots of that. There's no receipts whatsoever.
I haven't seen any receipts. In fact, we've seen blatant lies. Like there's so many photographs in the trailer that aren't actually from. They're just stock footage. Like some from Harry premieres, one from Katie Price's court appearance. There's been no proof handed out. However, we can prove that some of the photographs have been lies. So the only proof that we're getting at the moment is proof that some of it's not true.
Yeah, that's interesting. So everything is very counters receipts. It's the opposite of receipts. It's like counter that. It doesn't seem like what they're trying to do isn't paying off. It's like an invoice. What's the opposite of a receipt? Is it an invoice, I suppose? Is it like an invoice? Would you say?
Just like a receipt.
Yeah,
like
just
nothing.
In
the receipt machine. So
just like a refunds.
Yeah.
There we go, refunds. But yeah, well, again, sort of to wrap it up, very disappointed, very political, didn't seem to serve any purpose other than to cause more division and attack Britain, the people, and one of our very important institutions, using one of our own.
I agree with that 100%. And what I would say is we're going to do another video just disputing the facts, very, very sort of bullet point based, and bring on the next 3 episodes.
Wait with bated breath. All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys. Cheers.
Bye.